Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Dickey, and under your chapter Minnesota HSMAI chapter president. Joining me today is Klaus Kohlmayr from Ideas Revenue Solutions. This is our first episode of 2021 of our Minnesota Live series. We started this last year. We have a great lineup of a lot of repeat guests from last year that were popular, and we're looking at some new topics. So we're wanting to hear from you, and if there's something that you want to hear or see from us this year, then please reach out to us at our email address or on our website. And check out hsmaiminnesota.com and to register for our webinars. We already have 4 or 5 webinars working over the next few months that are open for registration. We'll be posting them on LinkedIn and Facebook as we stay up to date. So, at HSMAI, we're committed to be your local source of hospitality education and networking. We're preparing for a great year. In addition to what we already have scheduled, we're always looking to improve. We're always open to feedback. So like I said, if you have something you'd like to learn in 2020 or a certain issue in hospitality, especially in Minnesota, that we can find a local expert to talk about, then please, let us know. And then as always with these meetings, I always have to give a shout out for volunteering with HSMAI. We've added 2 great new board members this year that hit the ground running and they're ready to go, and they've offered us a great new perspective, and we're always looking for some more new ideas from folks in Minnesota and hospitality professionals in Minnesota to join us in helping us prepare great content for all of you. Volunteering for me for the past 4 years has been great. Last year wasn't the easiest first year as president, but we got through it, and we're ready to go for 2021. And help will especially be needed when we start our in-person events, hopefully later this year. We're going to we got a webinar series scheduled for the first half of the year. We're going to work into some hybrid events going forward, hopefully sooner rather than later with some hybrid events. So keep an eye out for those. And then hopefully in the latter part of the year, as it's safely able to do, we can do our full in-person networking events that I know that we all love, getting back and seeing each other in person again. So, I always use a little bit of this time to promote the chapter a little bit, a little airtime for that. But I want to get to the topic at hand. So I'll introduce the guest this month. Many of you already know him. You've seen him on his Unconstrained podcast that he had over the last year that you did. How many episodes, Klaus? 30, 33, something like that?
I just recorded 38 this morning.
38, great. Yeah. And he has one of the coolest sounding job titles in the industry, Chief Evangelist. And so our Chief Evangelist from Ideas, Klaus Kohlmayr. Welcome, Klaus.
Yeah, thank you. It's always great to be here, and count me in for the hybrid or face-to-face meetings later this year. I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome.
Hopefully you find a great venue somewhere in the Twin Cities area or somewhere right there. I'm always super excited to be here with the group.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of that, if you have a venue in the Twin Cities that you want to host an event, let us know. Shoot us an email, and we'll get working on that. We always like to highlight new and exciting event venues in the Twin Cities, and we're always willing to work with anyone who's willing to host us. So thank you for that. So we'll get started here, and if anyone can think back. It was 11 months ago, February 28th, 2020, Klaus and I actually sat down face-to-face in the same room and had this similar conversation about the roaring 20s of revenue management. I had just gotten back from a trip to Las Vegas. Klaus, I'm sure you were getting back from somewhere because that's what you were always doing at that point in time. We didn't have masks on. We didn't have to have a negative COVID test to see each other. Everything was kind of back to the way it was. It seems like so long ago, but we had the similar conversation about the roaring 20s. And I remember that a little bit because I think right after that meeting, you told me that ITB in Berlin was canceled. And that was like the first huge event that was canceled. And it was kind of it snowballed from there, and we all know what happened. But still, the topic kind of today remains the same. And so we're talking about the roaring 20s of revenue management. With all that went on last year, Klaus, what is the same, or why is it still going to be the roaring 20s after the year we had last year?
Well, I think we can refer back to last year as the roller coaster of 2020 rather than the roaring 2020. That's for sure. And I didn't realize it was exactly a year. I was just talking to some colleagues earlier, and we had a big kickoff in Spain exactly a year ago, and we were all heading back from a very exciting start to the year in Spain, where we had celebrated our successes and looked forward to 2020. And that was kind of a last gathering as a company, big company gathering actually since then. So it's been definitely a changed world, and it's been devastating. I read statistics yesterday from the AHLA that came out with a new report about 2021, and that the millions of jobs that have been at the moment lost in hospitality, broader hospitality, and 600,000 jobs that for the moment in the hotel industry specifically have been lost over the last 12 months. So definitely devastating. I know lots of my friends and colleagues, ex-colleagues, are looking for jobs and looking for places. And I'm encouraged to see that a lot of companies are starting to rehire, from big companies, Marriott and Hilton. I've seen some postings on LinkedIn. We are hiring at Ideas, and I know smaller tech startups and hospitality travel companies are starting to rehire. So that's very positive to see. Why do I still believe this is the roaring 2020s? Well, we're only kind of in the first year of a decade, so we still have 9 years to go. And if you look at way back previous pandemics, we have to go back 100 years back, but previous recessions, you do see that when bad things happen, as soon as it is safe to travel again, people start getting on flights, and people start staying in hotels, and people start visiting their family and hanging out for social events and getting married and celebrating the important things in their life. So I heard as I said, I recorded the Unconstrained Conversation podcast episode 38 this morning with somebody in India, and she referred to as a revenge travel that they're looking forward to, right? So I do think when we get through this, not if we get through it, but when we get through it over the next few months, great news coming out of the government today that they're going to accelerate vaccinations, and hope maybe by the summer they'll have enough vaccines for every single American to get their shots and then move forward. So when we get through this, I think there is a lot of discretionary spending. The macroeconomic things haven't changed, right? Discretionary spending is still available for many people. The middle class is still rising. More and more people will have more and more money to spend on things other than basic shelter and food. And it is proven that the first thing that people spend money on is typically travel and experiences, and that hasn't changed. There's still trillions of dollars over the next 5-10 years that are going to be spent on travel. So as we pass the peak of the pandemic, hopefully in the next few months, we get vaccinated, restrictions will be lifted over the next 12 months. We'll see this travel behavior kicking in. I'm a firm believer. I'm always an optimist, so I'm a firm believer that in a year's time, when we have this conversation again, we'll look much more positive than we did today.
Yeah, so sort of a different approach a little bit, because I think last year we were talking about being the roaring 20s because the revenue manager position was actually being more valuable because it was able to take apart the demand and figure out what is the most profitable pieces of business and things like that. And in this sense, right now with the recovery coming up, is that they're just important because there's so much demand to control, and there's pent up demand, and we want to make sure that we're managing it correctly.
Well, there's a couple of things. Yeah, sorry, there's a couple of things, and you're right. The premise we talked about last year is still true. The revenue management system or your revenue management platform still has the most accurate data you will probably get in a hotel, right? So it's if it's not the PMS, it's your revenue management system, and I would argue the revenue management system is often cleaner than your other systems, right? So where do you go to get the most accurate data, the most trustworthy data? Your revenue management technology. Who is the most analytically astute person who hopefully can tell the right story with data or through data? Is the revenue manager, right? And that person hopefully is equipped to bring that story across to the executives. Who is the person who can look out and understand where demand is going, what's changed, how your market's changed, do these environmental scans, and then provide the right strategies to the executives and management owners, asset managers, who are even closer looking today than in the past about the forecast and pricing and positioning, because margins are more squeezed, right? So I would argue that the revenue management discipline and the revenue management processes has become even more important than in the past. And actually, we've seen that over the last few months, where we've seen a number of companies investing more heavily into revenue management technology and restructuring the revenue management departments to be set up appropriately for the rebound.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So how do you think how do you think that's changed with respect to how the pandemic affected the job loss? So we saw some revenue managers lost their jobs due to the pandemic because they weren't able to be afforded by the hotel anymore. We definitely know that they were valued, but they just weren't able to be there anymore. And as the industry comes back, do you see that there is more cluster revenue managing going on than single property revenue managing? Or do you
Yes.
think we're going to get back to where we were before?
No, I mean, just yesterday morning, I had a conversation with the CEO of a mid-sized hotel company in Germany, and obviously it's not Minnesota, but and his question was exactly that, right? I'm going to run my 30 hotels with 3 central revenue managers with some support in the hotels. But how do I do that, right? How do I automate? How do I make myself more efficient? How do I become more productive? How do I get access to the right data? And how do we go about, making sure that we equip those central revenue managers with the right tools and the right processes and the right discipline around telling that story through data? We've absolutely seen a move towards centralization and automation, and those are the 2 trends I think that are going to continue for the time being. But I do feel that because it's very different than 8 years ago, where we had, or 10 years ago when we had the last recession in 2008 to 2010. We had a lot of challenges convincing people that revenue management is relevant 10 years ago. We feel that there is less of a question about the relevancy of revenue management today. There's obviously a lot of companies that are struggling with making profit and generating enough money to pay off their debts and their lenders and all of that, and we're helping with all of these conversations. But the question about the importance of revenue management is no longer in question, or the importance or the criticality of revenue management is no longer in question. People realize that it's critical, it's needed. Revenue management talent is important, and it's even more critical as we reignite the industry over the next 6 months.
Okay, great. So, so speaking to our younger members who are just getting started in their career, would you say revenue manager, the supply of the expertise is still needed, or I guess I should say a different way, are revenue managers in excess supply? Is there still a great need for that to develop younger students or generations into that profession as we move on?
Yeah, in revenue management, we talk about supply and demand. So probably right now the supply is a little bit higher than the demand.
Right. Yep.
But that imbalance is going to balance itself out over the next few months, right? Over the next 12, 18 months. I think what any business needs, what the hotel industry needs, is people that are analytically minded, that understand data, love to work with data, and understand how to translate that into strategies, right? Call it a revenue manager, call it a data-driven and insights-driven person. I wouldn't constrain myself to say you want to be just in revenue management. I think it's beyond revenue management now. It's about total profitability, total revenue management. It's about commercial success rather than just pricing and revenue management in a traditional sense. And if I would be a revenue manager starting out today, I would look at how do I ensure commercial success and profitability for the property or for the hotel or for the asset that I'm responsible for, or the assets, right, at a corporate level. So working very closely with sales, with marketing, distribution, loyalty, to understand what are the levers I can influence and I can impact for the overall commercial success and profitability for my hotel.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. I think it's a lot more holistic approach than when I think you said 8 years ago, and that's about when I got into revenue management. And so I've pretty much seen, I went from not knowing what it was at all to seeing the entire evolution of it, from being a person who enters tomorrow's rate into the computer to the person who is what you just described, the full profitability strategist, if you will, of the company, of the hospitality company, and actually even um, a highly regarded person in the leadership position in that company as well. So, um, they do. It's good to hear that you see it still showing value like it was before in a different sense, and it's good, and it's a good advice for our future revenue managers out there.
I think
But
there's a
now,
huge
yep, go ahead.
sorry, there's a huge
Yep,
opportunity. Sorry to interrupt, right? But
nope,
there is a gap. People at the board level, at the executive level, at the operations level, because there is so much uncertainty out there. People are looking for fact-based data, and they're
mhm,
looking for data to make objective decisions. Right? Remove the emotions, be rational, use data to make your decisions, especially as you have so much uncertainty around it. Who is going to give them that information and that guidance?
mhm,
Who is a better person than a revenue manager to do that, right? Or
yep,
a commercial leader to do that. And that's the big opportunity for revenue management to step into and say, we're the people that understand how the data, what the data says. We help with objective and rational decision making. We provide you with the right story backed on data, and we will help guide an organization through the turbulent times we're in.
right. That's perfect. Yeah. Um, what but now let's move on to talking about more about the recovery. So I'm going to repeat a question that I asked you on your unconstrained conversation, because you
Mhm.
answered it perfectly, and I love the
Thank you.
question. I've been asking my team about it all the time, and my revenue managers about all the time. Um, uh, is, we just got word from STR. We got a report from STR for their upgraded forecast. They downgraded the forecast for 2021 to 4.8% ADR growth in 21, and then 8.2% ADR growth in 22, year over year growth. Um, Q1 is turning out to look like the pandemic of late last year, in the hospitality world at least. And so we're off to a slow start. So we're actually going to have pretty significant growth in ADR over the summer just to even get to that 4.8%, that 4.8% growth. And then, and 22 will actually be like a normal year. So maybe that 8.2% growth isn't as lofty as I originally thought was when I asked you the question, but I just wanted to bring it up again. And so, do you think demand, and I'm wording it differently, so do you think demand is going to be that much more inelastic this year, where consumers won't be as sensitive to price hikes? And then how is that changing or price, I should say price hikes, I should say price changes.
Mm.
And how will that change from next year or this year to 22 and beyond?
Yeah, I can't remember how I answered the question, so I don't want to dispute what I said in December, right? But I think the reality is we have seen a lot of instances where people are price insensitive, right? And people want to go to the mountains, and they want to go to the resorts, and they want to go to the North Shore and hang out right at the resorts on Lake Superior, and they're willing to pay prices for it that maybe they weren't willing to pay in the past. One of the reasons is because they haven't been sitting in planes, and they haven't been eating in restaurants, and they haven't been spending money on clothing and other things. So there's more discretionary spend or available spend, right? Discretionary money that they can spend. So there is a lot of demand that is inelastic, price inelastic. I think people will be even more willing to spend on travel and experiences in 2021, because it'll be even longer that we've all been locked up, and we'll be more desperate to go out. So it's not going to be a general theme. It's resorts, leisure destinations, national parks, campgrounds, RVs, they're all going to continue, Airbnbs, they're all going to be doing very, very well. City, conference, meeting and events, convention centers, they're all going to continue to suffer a lot. I think we'll see a lot of kind of M&A and M&A activity starting to happen, and we see that already. Marriott announced something yesterday or the day before that they're, buying some all-inclusive resorts.
Yep.
We might see more of that happening in the next few months, and I think we will. So, I think the hotels that are in those sweet spots of resorts and leisure destinations, long stay and alternative accommodation are going to continue to be able to price more aggressively than a city hotel, right? That's just the reality.
And I'll take a break for a second here. If you have any questions for Klaus, I'll get to those in a second here. Feel free to type them into the chat while we're talking through this topic. I forgot to mention that, but type them in the chat and we'll get to them. Or if you, we'll have time for you to come off mute as well. So whatever you want to do to type a question in there, I'll be watching that. So, but to build more on that, so you find yourself in a situation where you're in what you just described. You're in that area for, say, you have a hotel, and that is it. Is the best advice just to kind of close down put blinders on to the past and close your spectrum a little bit and say, I'm going to price for my demand right now, and I'm not going to really worry about a number. I'm just going to price on how my property is performing, not worried about competitors, just your own property?
No, you do have to worry about your competitors, right? But you have to understand how your competitors' environment have changed, right? Some of them might not be around anymore, or they might be still, suffering. You have to understand how your segmentation and how your market's changed. Have you really gone through and understand the drivers of the people that are coming to your destination and how that's changed? Some people just have to travel, right? There's still a lot of logistics people, manufacturing, transportation, healthcare. They all have to travel, and they're not going to stop. And then there's other travel, obviously, that's discretionary. But have you gone back and really relooked at your segmentation, your market, your competitive environment, and done a thorough analysis of what the changes are and reset your strategy accordingly, and then put the right things in place for the next 6 months? So you absolutely have to do a complete SWOT analysis for your hotel, but I would start that almost from zero and say, this is a new environment. I'm not going to assume that what happened in 2019 or 18 is still relevant. The market's changed, sensitivities have changed, needs have changed, right?
Yeah, and further, more important to have a good quality revenue manager and a revenue management system to help you out with that. I mean, one of the things that we been trying to do for a few years working with an RMS is to tell the hotel that the price is more than just the number. It's exactly what you just talked about. It's the segmentation. It's how your consumers respond. It's how your competitors respond. It's all of that put together and a whole SWOT analysis strategy that you need to do. So, these hotels, maybe one thing we can take from this past year is that your hotel isn't fixed to a certain dollar amount. You aren't you aren't a certain dollar amount property hotel. You don't have to price in this range window all the time. I mean, you have your cost per occupied room, of course, and then you have your price point where your consumers no longer find value. That's a pretty wide range. But trying to get out of that spectrum and say, what is the best spot for this? Not even for your rack rate, but just like for a specific segment, for a specific consumer, for a time period. And so I think it just brings back a little bit more, it draws more attention to the science as the revenue manager kind of restarts. So that's great.
Yeah, you need to have a rigorous analytical process, right? And the next 6 months are going to be different phases, right? The current phase is very restrictive. People that have to travel will travel. They're a little bit price insensitive, right? So what are the segments that are doing that? Then the next phase, April, May, we're going to see some leisure travel starting to kick in. People are going to feel more comfortable, right? Then we'll have the weddings restarting. We'll have friends and family visits restarting. We'll see more of that kind of a segment coming back. And then as of September, October, we'll see corporate travel starting to come back, meetings and events starting to bubble back up in virtual or hybrid environments. And then hopefully, full face-to-face. By the end of the year. So I see these phases emerging over the next few months. First with kind of the current phase, but then we're going to see the other segments building up from where we are today.
Okay, that's good. One other thing that was interesting to me about the new forecast was that they were showing that the upper end, like you just described, the hotels that have large convention space and the higher end hotels in specific areas might be a little bit more, have a little bit longer recovery period or a longer recession. And actually, through 21, their ADR is actually forecasted to be down to last year. And I think you answered this before when I asked you this on your podcast, was that surprisingly, in 2020, not everybody dropped their rates. There were some properties that didn't do it. They still got strong rates. As we move into 21, with that kind of forecast on that upper end, what kind of price pressure do you think what kind of impact does that drive all the way down to the economy side?
Yeah, it's a good, very good question. I would answer it different. I would think about it differently. It's like, what is the survivability of some of these hotels, right? If you look at, I'm thinking about some of the big boxes in New York City or in Chicago that are driven by convention business. Will we see them being converted to residential or other kind of purposes, right? Will they be converted into office buildings or residential? I'm not sure that all these convention and meeting hotels will survive. We might see a reduction in that supply. But you're absolutely right. On the one hand, you have the super high-end hotels, and people are still spending money. They're taking a private jet and they're showing up and they're renting out the whole place for a week for their friends, right? And they don't mind spending $100,000 just to get the whole Waldorf Astoria somewhere on an island or something like that, right? But on the other hand, you have the five-star hotel in downtown markets, very, very difficult right now. And of course, a lot of hotels are just trying to get some semblance of occupancy. But on the other hand, when you're seeing that the earnings calls from big owners owning and management companies, a lot of them, they're not even planning on reopening the hotels until June this year, right? So Park Hotels has come out. I think Bremer Hotels has come out and said, those very, very big hotels in city center locations like in New York, we're not even thinking of opening them up for the time being. So we're just going to let them be mothballed and then see what we'll do later.
Okay. Yeah. So again, like you said, knowing your competitors and if they're even open, and if how they impact, and you might have different competitors now that impact your business more than you thought before, and so it's another part of that reset. Who impacts your hotel now, and it might be very different from what it was in 2019 and definitely 2020. Okay. So at this time, I don't have any questions in the chat, but does anyone on the phone have any questions for Klaus? Anything we've talked about or anything that you've been dying to ask him and you haven't had him on the phone ever?
I'm waiting for the really difficult questions.
Okay. Well, if one comes to mind, everybody's on mute.
Yeah, nobody's asked me anything about extended, alternative accommodation and Airbnb yet. So I'm like, nobody's gonna ask the question or what?
If you want to talk about it, you can talk about it, Klaus. This is our conversation, right?
No, I mean, talking about different segments and different needs.
Yeah,
I think every hotel should look at why is Airbnb projecting a 30% revenue increase for next year. Right now that they're public, there's a lot of information that they're posting about their forecast for next year and beyond, right? So what kind of travelers are they attracting, and what are some of the strong points why do people choose an Airbnb over a hotel, and how do hotels position themselves differently to get some of that demand into their hotels, right? Obviously, the hotel offers safety and security and standardization, and the brand that provides safety to the traveler. But there's still a lot of travelers that like to be in an independent unit and in a self-contained apartment with a kitchen and everything like that. I could argue probably a lot of the hotels have opportunities to maybe think about that kind of traveler and position themselves and market themselves around, yep, we can ensure that you're self-contained, and we have the services and the accommodation that will allow you to have a similar experience as in a alternative accommodation, but in a hotel environment. So combine kind of both the brand promise and the expectation of of an typical Airbnb traveler, and take advantage of that. Right, work from anywhere. Big thing will still be around for a while. How do you cater to that? We've seen subscription models appear in hotels, which we've talked about for a long time. And we've seen some now emerging where citizen-M has launched something where you pay $1,500 a month and you can stay in any of their hotels around the world, I think up to 30 days. And you just keep paying $1,500 a month and you can choose any of their properties, which is it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I know that part of that it's a part of the past year we've been forced to be creative, and Airbnb and extended stay not extended stay as much, but Airbnb for sure has been a question with us since they became a threat in the marketplace. Are they going to be a threat? Are they going to be a competitor? Are they not? Are they here? Well, they're here now, and now they're projecting growth higher than us, and they're actually, or not us, higher than hospitality industry or traditional hotels. And I think, what was it, last year they had more transactions than Booking.com or more transactions than Expedia. I can't remember which one it was, but
more searches, definitely more searches than all of them combined, I think.
Right. And so they obviously have this big, huge footprint, and they still have the same, in my opinion, they still have some of the same, growth opportunities or things to fix when it comes to security and things like that. There's still that conflict there between hotels and Airbnb. But from a consumer standpoint, I mean, we have a lot of both camps. I think we have we still have consumers that want their traditional hotel room. They like their room on their own. They like it clean. They like the building. They like the restaurant. They like the amenities. And some are like, I want to stay with my whole family in a house on the beach, and I'll pay whatever it is to do that. I want to stay there for a month. Especially with this work anywhere. Trend we have going on right now. So it's interesting how that's evolved, and we keep a close eye on it, especially working for Radisson and a big brand. We we always have that, where's our competitors at, and how does that, in certain areas, does the Airbnb market affect our consumers?
And I know of alternative stay companies now that they're taking the opportunity, buying hotels and converting them into their own branded accommodations, right? So think about that. A few years ago, who would have thought that some of these well-capitalized, well-funded companies go out and buy a hotel and then put their own brand name on it and then sell it as a vacation rental, right? So that's how COVID has enabled the industry to very quickly transform and evolve.
Great. Okay, so I still don't have anything in the chat. Everyone's running on the treadmill or eating right now. They don't want to talk with their food in their mouth.
It's probably my German accent that's intimating everyone. I'm sorry. Intimidating, sorry.
Right.
Intimidating.
So I guess I got a couple other questions for you, and until we wrap up here. So you're a frequent traveler, or you were. I'm not sure how much you've gotten back into it yet. So in absence of that frequent travel over 2020, you've had lots of great conversations. What has been your most exciting conversation or series of conversations that you've been having since you kind of got off the road and started being more of a virtual evangelist?
Yeah, it's been a big change. I used to travel, I think, for the last 20 years, about 200 days a year. And my last business trip was probably a year ago. So I think at the end of February, I came back from a meeting on the East Coast, and that was, I think, with the last one, where I came back from Europe somewhere. So it's been very different, but I think one benefit of it is because everyone else has been very light on travel. A lot of people are available to have conversations, and I think the really exciting conversations I had I remember one with the CEO of Remington, Sloan Dean. Very early on, he was talking about using this day zero mindset, and you can look it up on the website for the podcast. but it's understanding that your business is at day zero, and every day going forward is a new day. So not looking at kind of how do we get back to 2019, how do we get back to 2018, but thinking about this is the situation we're in, how do we make the best out of it, and how do we move forward, right?
Right.
That was a very interesting conversation I had with him.
I remember hearing that one.
Okay, good.
Yep.
You were the one listener on my one download a week. Thank you.
We're gonna get a few more there, right? Yeah.
I remember Campgrounds of America and Delaware North. We were talking about leisure and demand for the summer, which was great because that all materialized. As they had, Campground of America had done a lot of research about the changing customer behavior and changing customer needs in April and May. Translated that into a strategy. The strategy worked out, and they did very well in the summer. I think they did better during the summer months, Delaware North and Campground America, than any previous year. Obviously, it wasn't enough for overall to be better than ever before, but the summer months were better than ever before, which is incredible. Go ahead. You wanted to ask a question?
I was to say that's another unique segment that I've discovered over the last year is that those campgrounds, and it's not the tent that you have in a tiny bag in your back of your truck anymore. It's something that gets set up. It takes more than one person to set up, and they're very, very glamorous looking at tents in some of those areas where they call it camping or glamping, I guess is what they call it. So. I wanted to try that out.
Yeah, you should try out. I've tried out a company called Under the Canvas.
I've heard of that. Yep.
Or Canvas Under the Stars or something like that. I've stayed with them a couple times in Moab. Brilliant experience. You're outside of Moab. You're a little bit in the desert, and it's the right combination of amenities and luxury, and being outdoors. Under the stars. So it's brilliant. Not cheap, but I think it's worth it for a couple nights.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. So, travel goals for 21 and beyond, right? So
That's right. And the other conversations I've had was with Isaac Colazo, who used to be with IHG, now he's with SDR. David Warman at Four Seasons, and we all talked about being a profit hunter. So moving from a revenue manager to a profit hunter, right? Exploring opportunities, as I mentioned, about profitability and commercial success. And then Isaac and I talked about, how do you become a data storyteller? So how do you use data to your benefits, and how do you translate that data and provide the right information to the executive team? And it was interesting because Isaac worked with IHG. He worked with IHG for a long time.
No, pero para comer, sí.
Or you have somebody accidentally come off mute, it sounds like.
Yeah, he worked with IHG for a long time, and he's become one of the best data storytellers that I know. So there was a very, very interesting conversation. So if I wrap up last year, then I had many conversations, like with a friend of mine who's in New Zealand, who runs sales and marketing for our core. We talked about how New Zealand is doing well versus others. I talked with a group of investors in Australia, which was interesting, and around the world. So that's always kind of giving me the international and global perspective.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. And I'm sure traveling is a lot of fun. I miss it a little bit myself, but yeah. But yeah, that's a whole different. And you've gotten to talk to a lot of great people over the last year, so that's good. And it's provided good content for me, and so for all of us that have listened. And you talked a little bit, and your conversation with Sloan Dean, it kind of alludes to my last question I have for you today as we wrap up is, I like my sports analogies, and we always refer to it in sports as having a short memory. So if you get sacked in football, the next play, you don't want to play like you're going to get sacked every play, because you're not going to do very well. And if you lose a game on a fluke play, you got to play the next game like that one didn't happen. So in the same sense, I think revenue managers need to have a little bit of a short memory here. And like you just talked about, day zero. So what is one thing that we should, sorry, I have to rephrase this question. What's one thing we should take from 2020, and what's one thing we should actually just leave behind?
Ooh, I like the sports analogy. I'm not talking about 2020, 2021. I'm a skier, right? So I'm from Austria. And when you ski down and you do the slalom, right? You go in the flow and you go next goal, next, whatever they call it, pole, right?
Hmm.
Ski around the pole and then the next one, and you hopefully, do it better than everyone else. So it's kind of revenue management is right now it's kind of, okay, where's the next goalpost?
Hmm.
Let's get through that. Then we go down the next goalpost. And as we do that, we pick up speed as we go, not hopefully not downhill, but hopefully in the right direction. And so my sports analogy would be just go from goalpost to goalpost to goalpost and make sure that you're moving in the right direction. I think what we've learned from 2020 is a lot of uncertainty, but I've seen a lot of resilience, right? And in 2020, and that's been amazing to see how the industry is pulled together. Kind of the sport ecosystem around hotels has pulled together. I know how much time we've spent with our clients to help them through the uncertainty, the new tools and that we've launched, right? COVID dashboards and insights and total revenue management, kind of planning and operational planning. So I think what we've learned is that with a lot of uncertainty comes also a lot of opportunity.
Hmm.
And a lot of people have taken the time to look at the opportunities and reset their strategy and rethink kind of what they want to do and what's critical, professionally and personally as well. So I think that's been good. I think we can take that resilience and we can take that forward. And as we say here up here in the slide, right?
Yep.
Our theme today this year is about reinventing and reimagining and reigniting the hospitality industry. And I think that's what 2021 and probably the early part of 2022 is really all about.
Okay. Anything we should leave behind of 2020? And
Leave COVID behind.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, there's so much learnings we had from this year. I mean, there's a lot of things we want to forget about last year, and maybe we take the learnings from it and we understand how do we how. I mean, it's not even about improvement. It's just how do we reset and reinvent yourselves.
Yeah.
The HSMAI theme for this year is Rise Up, and
Right.
so we want to rise up to the challenge and get back in gear. And actually, with our chapter this year, we're trying to get some content about reinventing yourself. How does your career move forward from here? If you had a setback due to a job loss, or if you had something else happen where you had to take a different job, how do you get back to what you want to do and what you desire, whether it's revenue management, sales, marketing, and we're definitely here to help. So
that's great. Actually,
yep.
Tomorrow we're releasing our next episode of the podcast, and it's all about revenue management mentorship, career development. What are some of the resources and opportunities that are out there for the revenue management community? So it's very timely that you just mentioned.
Awesome.
I had a whole conversation with that with somebody in the UK who've built a revenue management mentorship program for free for the global revenue management community. So very timely. Yeah.
Great. And I'll look that up when I get off here, and I'll share it on our channels and our website as well, so we can get it out to our community. So thank you for that. I want to be respectful of time here, and so I could talk about this topic with you, Klaus, for hours. I mean, I think that if we were, at an event, we'd be chatting over a couple beers, and it'd be, a good conversation like that. And looking forward to doing that again. And I hope that you can come for our ROC conference, hopefully, that we have at the end of this year. We usually have it in October, after the HSMAI ROC, that's I think is in Dallas in late September.
Right.
So we do a Minneapolis version of that, and obviously, Ideas is a great sponsor for that, and we will definitely be in touch with you and your team about providing some content for us there.
I'm always there. Oh
yeah.
yeah, it's already in my calendar. So
last time we went to Topgolf, maybe we'll have to do that again, right?
That's right.
So that was fun. So, all right. So I'll wrap up here. Thanks, Klaus, for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to his podcast, Unconstrained Conversations, from wherever you can get it, wherever you get your podcast from. It's a great addition to your library. I have it pop up in mine every so often. You can listen to it whenever. But we're really looking forward to seeing all of you on the phone, or if you're watching this on your own, in an event in the future. We have a great lineup of speakers coming up for webinars this year. They're always going to be on Wednesdays once a month right now from 12 to 1, same time. The next one is February 24th. We don't have a topic for it yet, but we're just finalizing that one. But we have Courtney from Meet Minneapolis coming back this year. We have Bob Anderson to talk about sales this year. In April, we'll have another Expedia update from Kelly in May with a lot of great things to talk about, all local content from those three, which is great for our chapter. And they're all open to register right now. So get them on your calendar and start planning and come join the conversation with us there. So looking forward to some great conversations like today we had with Klaus, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Stephen. Always
Thanks,
love
Klaus.
to come here. Talk soon.
Thanks. Yep. Bye.